suppliers, all the stakeholders. We look for a sense of purpose, leadership. And then we said, okay, what about financial performance now? What do we think we're going to find? We wrote down our hypotheses. They're paying their people, frontline people, in some cases double what the competition is paying, but in most cases higher. They're also providing great benefits like healthcare. They are paying their suppliers well. They're not squeezing their suppliers. Suppliers are profitable. They're paying taxes at a much higher rate. They're investing in their communities. They're investing in their environment. They're investing in great customer service. So he said, well, all of that has to come from somewhere, so maybe investors are getting good but not phenomenal returns, right? And then we did the financial analysis over a 10-year period, and now we've added 5 more years of data. And what we found blew us away, because these companies are outperforming the market by 10.5 to 1 over 15 years. In the book, it is 9 to 1 because we had 10 years of data. Now we've added 5 more years. We said, wait a minute, what's going on here? How can this be possible? Are these companies printing money in the basement? Have they discovered something that we don't know? This sounds like alchemy, right? This sounds like voodoo economics. I mean, what is this? But then we've started to understand that these companies have tapped into the most powerful force out there, which is creative human energy, which is essentially unlimited. And most companies have no access to that, because they are tapped into the drivers of superior performance, which are people who are turned on and excited and motivated, enthusiastic. They provide great customer service. They have great ideas. They're innovative. They're creative. They are resourceful. They're resilient. And they're not wasting money on things like lots of ads and lots of coupons and gimmicks and constant employee turnover and having to train and hire new people to replace people who are unhappy. And they're not wasting a lot of money on administrative overhead. They don't have managers telling other people what to do, because people are self-organizing, self-managing, and self-motivating. They don't have a lot of layers of management. They don't have very high legal costs because they're operating in a system of trust. They don't have very high product returns because they're creating high-quality products that people like, etc. They're not wasting money on a lot of non-value-adding activities. They are investing money where it does make a difference in product quality and the quality of the experience for employees and for customers. And when you do all of that, you align all the forces together and you create extraordinary value. You reduce the friction in the system. Most companies operate with a lot of friction that dissipates a lot of energy into heat and unproductive activity. We also compared what we found with these businesses with another very well-known book called Good to Great. You're all familiar with Good to Great, #1 best-selling business book of all time. And every time I see it, it's got another million sold. And I said, oh no, there's another million people who are misinformed. Okay. Why? Because I think this book is taking a step back from his earlier book called Built to Last. It simply defined greatness on one dimension. It said a great company is one that produces more shareholder wealth. And so all they did was, over the 100 years, they looked for companies that produced at least 3x returns over at least 14 years. For whatever reason, they defined those two as the criteria. And when you do that over the last 100 years, you find only 11 companies met that they had outperformed continuously over a period of time. And that list included Circuit City, which is now bankrupt, Fannie Mae, which was part of the financial meltdown, Wells Fargo, which took $25 billion in government rescue money. They were part of the mortgage mess. Walgreens, which is a drug retailer, nothing special. Also includes Philip Morris, the world's largest tobacco company at the time, was cited as one of the 11 great companies of the last 100 years because they created a lot of money for shareholders on a sustained basis. And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean by great? Is the world better because Philip Morris was so good at what they did? What is the impact of their being here? This year, 6 million people will die directly from tobacco. This century, 1,000 million people will die, 1/7 of humanity, directly from tobacco. Life expectancy goes down by 15 years. And public health systems worldwide spend $650 billion a year dealing with the consequences of tobacco, most of which is coming out of taxpayer money. It's not showing up on the balance sheet of the tobacco companies. That's your net impact on the world. You own that. If you had to account for all of that in your income statement and balance sheet, would you look so great? And by the way, if these companies were selected purely on financial performance, shouldn't they continue to perform well financially at least? That's their only saving grace. We looked at them in the most recent 15, you can't really see this, 15, 10, 5, and 3 years. These companies basically just track the market in the last 15 years. They are way below the market in the last 10, 5, and 3 years, even as these conscious businesses or firms of endearment are dramatically outperforming the market. over all of those, these last 5, 10, 5, 3 years have been very tough economic times, and yet these companies continue to outperform the market. And those so-called great companies don't, because they are not tapped into the sources of real value creation, which is doing something that matters and creating workplaces built on meaning and purpose and love and care. They're not doing that. We have to recognize that businesses create but also potentially destroy many kinds of wealth. It's not just about financial, intellectual wealth, intellectual capital, social capital, emotional well-being, building a business on love and not fear, sense of meaning and purpose, which is well-being, on the popular culture, the impact on our physical beings, on our health, and the impact on the environment. All of these are consequences of our actions as a business. A conscious business strives to create positive value on all 8 dimensions for all their stakeholders. And they do. A traditional business is content with trying to produce financial well-being for their shareholders. And often they don't even succeed at that. Remember, you can create but also destroy. In fact, I would argue in the future, if you don't do all these things, you can't even make money. Because all of these things are drivers. They are antecedents to value creation, financial value creation. Just very quickly, a little bit on purpose. I'll try to wind up in about the next 5 or 10 minutes. Very important book that I strongly recommend. Anil is nodding, so you've read this. Somebody gave me this book and I was almost 50 years old. I said, God, I wish somebody had given it to me when I was 15. Because it's a life-changing book. It's regarded as one of the 10 most important books ever written by the Library of Congress in the US. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist in Vienna, Austria in the 1940s. He was in his 40s. He had treated tens of thousands of patients who were suffering from depression and suicidal tendencies. And he treated them not using electroshock therapy or drugs, but by simply connecting them with what are the true drivers of happiness. He understood more than anybody else what makes people happy. Everybody wants to be happy, right? But he said happiness cannot be pursued. In the US Constitution, it says we're all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a false promise. The more you pursue happiness, it's like the horizon. You'll never get there. Because when you pursue happiness, all you're doing is trying to have more and more pleasure. Hedonic pleasure is not happiness. You wake up the next day, you're back to where you were. He said happiness cannot be pursued. Happiness ensues. It is the outcome of living a life of meaning and purpose. Those are the people who are truly, deeply happy and content. And that comes from doing work that matters, number one. It comes from loving without condition. Human beings are meant to love and care. The human drive to care, the human need to care for something, for someone, for a cause, for an idea, for something, is as important, in fact, as powerful as the human drive for self-interest. Adam Smith wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which was all about the human need to care. Unfortunately, capitalism never integrated that. We made it all about self-interest. If we had integrated the human need to care into our thinking about capitalism, we would have never had Marxism and communism emerge as a counter idea. And today now we're integrating that. And finding meaning in your suffering. This is a really, really powerful idea. We are all guaranteed to go through terrible things in our lives. We don't control the things that will happen to us. Loved ones will pass away, many things will happen. What we do control is how we respond. The last of the human freedoms is the ability to choose how we respond. And if you respond to a situation in a way that actually finds some meaning in it, so the simple equation that captures it, despair equals suffering minus meaning. Just think about that. Despair equals suffering minus meaning. If there's no meaning, then suffering leads to despair. Extreme suffering leads to extreme despair, which means people don't want to live anymore. But if you can find some meaning, then your despair goes down. If you can find more meaning, then your despair can disappear. If you find even more meaning, your despair can turn into the opposite of despair. What is the opposite of despair? What is negative despair? Is it joy? Is it hope? Right? Think about the mother whose daughter was killed on the way home from visiting her friend, 11-year-old girl in Minneapolis. A driver swerves off the road and knocks her down and kills her. Family has tremendous suffering, tremendous despair. Somebody noted down the license plate. They managed to arrest this person. They found out that he was drunk. Now they had tremendous anger. There's somebody to blame. 3 days later, they found out that this person had been arrested 3 previous times for drunk driving and had received a slap on the wrist and nothing more. And now there was anger, not only that he was to blame, but actually it's not him, it's the system is to blame. We are allowing people to continue to do this until somebody dies. And eventually when the mother came to be able to think straight, her one thought was, I don't want this to happen to others. What happened to my daughter is so terrible. What happened to our family? I don't want the others to suffer this. So she then started a movement at a local level to say, how are we handling drunk drivers? What are the laws on the books? They're so mild. Eventually, she got the laws changed in 38 United States in the country and 6 other countries. She founded an organization called Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD. How many lives do you think were saved by her actions? There's no way to know, right? But we know that it was probably hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands. She found meaning in her suffering that in some ways far exceeded her own suffering. Because she suffered a certain amount, she prevented the suffering of others, which was way more than that. She took a tragedy and made it into something ultimately positive. And that's what we are capable of as human beings, right? Now, why am I telling you all this? I think, as I said, it's a fundamentally important thing at any stage in life to think about this. But this translates directly to the world of business. Human beings pursue happiness, businesses pursue profits. But profits cannot be pursued. The more a business pursues profits, the less successful it will be in the long term. Profits ensue. They're the outcome of doing the right things. It's a very spiritual principle. Focus on the right actions, the outcome will take care of itself. The Buddha said, don't be attached to a cherished outcome. Because then you end up doing impure actions to achieve that number, that market share, that bottom line, whatever it is. From higher purpose, which is work that matters, from building a business on love, which is this, and then growing from adversity. Tough times happen. Good businesses, conscious businesses, emerge stronger from recessions than they were when they went in. And we've seen this with all these companies that we work with. Okay, I have some material here on purpose. I will leave the slides, and there are some videos on the web that you can see some of this stuff in more detail. But fundamentally, businesses that become about purpose maximization are then able to tap into a far more deeper source of human capacity. Purpose is, what is it? It's the difference you're trying to make, drives everything, matters to everybody. It's a reason for being that goes beyond making money, and yet it results in making more money than you thought possible. That's the paradox of profits. Southwest Airlines, one of the most, I think the most successful airline in the history of the world by some measures. 40 years of profitable quarters. Okay. At one point, their market capitalization exceeded the entire rest of the industry put together by 5x, even though their market share was 5 or 7%. Highly successful. But they think about their business in a very different way. When they started, only 15% of Americans had ever sat in an airplane. Today, 90% fly all the time. Why? Because they made it affordable, they made it fun, they made it accessible. They went to small cities, they dramatically lowered the fare. And you know what their stock market symbol is? Love. L-U-V. I interviewed their founder, Herb Kelleher, and their president, Colleen Barrett. She said, we just love you to death. We love our customers, we love our employees, we love everything. I mean, you see it, you go to their headquarters, it is imbued with love. And when they enter a new market, when they entered the Minneapolis market, they don't say that we're entering the Minneapolis market, they say we're going to liberate Minneapolis. We're going to liberate it from high fares and all these other airlines that are offering terrible service and all the rest of it. Google, one of the world's most successful companies, predicated on a higher purpose from day one. Organize the world's information, make it easily accessible and useful. And by the way, do it all for free. Okay, not bad, right? I mean, it's an extraordinary statement because it gives them unlimited opportunities for growth and value creation. Started with text information on the web, then they've added books, they've added audio information, they've added pictures, they've added videos, they've added map data, they've added the skies, they've added the ocean floors, they're now adding city maps. I mean, all kinds of things. They're adding medical records. There's no end to the amount of information that's out there and how much we can organize it. REI, Recreational Equipment Incorporated. We had the CEO at our conference. They produce gear for hiking and camping and all those kinds of things. And she had tears in her eyes when she said, do you know that our kids are now spending 55 hours every week looking at a screen? And they only spend 20 minutes in nature. Unstructured time, really communing with nature. And she said, what are we doing to ourselves? We're part of nature and we're completely getting disconnected from it. And he said, our purpose is very simple. We want to reconnect you back with nature. Come to us, we'll teach you about hiking, we'll show you how to set up a tent, we'll give you all the gear that you need. And even if you don't buy from us and you go and buy it online, it's okay. We achieved our purpose of connecting you to nature. Okay, stakeholders in the book we use in terms of endearment, this acronym SPICE. Society, partners, investors, customers, employees. Society needs to come first. Every business needs to be on the right side of society, and the enormous challenge is still out there. There are still 1 billion people living on less than $1 a day, but there's still about 2.5 billion people living on less than $2 a day. So there's still extraordinary levels of unmet needs out there. And every one of these is an opportunity for a conscious business to do things differently. When it comes to customers, for example, we call them consumers, and we think our job is to sell them as much stuff as possible. But there's a human being behind that hamburger. We need to think about the quality of their life and their well-being, not just how much can we sell them. It's not about marketing, it's not about feeding addictions, it's about improving the quality of life of people. It's conscious marketing. We need to think differently about business, society, and the planet. I was with the head of McDonald's CSR in Chicago, and he drew these circles. He said, okay, here's our business and here's society, and my job is here as CSR. And we have a director of sustainability who's the intersection with the planet over there. And I said, well, isn't this our planet, and isn't that human society completely within, and isn't that your business completely within human society? So how is the overlap not 100%? How is everything that you do not being looked at through the lens of how it impacts society, how it impacts the environment? So conscious view is very different about these things. About leaders, you cannot have a conscious business without conscious leaders. Start, as they say, physician, heal thyself. Gandhiji said we must be the change we want to see in the world. If you aspire to lead these kinds of organizations, first learn to lead yourself. The biggest challenge we have is self-management. We must continuously become and evolve into more and more conscious beings. Conscious leaders have emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and a systems mind. They can see the whole picture. They can understand interconnectedness. In addition to analytical, they have a tremendous capacity for love and care. We need to promote leaders. Think about it. In the world of political leadership, we can point to people like Gandhi and Lincoln and Mandela and King who embody strength and love and care at the same time. How many people in the world of business can we point to? Perhaps Ratan Tata, perhaps, I think maybe some others as well, I'm sure. But, we really haven't had in the world of business those kinds of role models. We've had on the one, we've had sort of ruthless, numbers-driven, bottom-line oriented leaders for the most part. And you have to have servant leadership as your, leaders who are really there to develop other people and bring out their own leadership abilities. How important is culture? Drucker, I think, said it best, as he did with so many things. He said, culture eats strategy for lunch. We don't think it waits until lunchtime. You could leave your strategic plan on the airplane. You could post it on the web. Doesn't matter. Your success as a business ultimately depends on your culture. And we define a conscious culture. I can walk into any company and I can tell you in about 10 minutes whether I think it's a conscious business or not. Because it's tactile, it's something I can feel. The positive energy, the enthusiasm. You stand in the lobby on Monday morning and see if they're running up the stairs 2 at a time, or if they're dragging themselves into it, right? But it also stands for some of these attributes that are very common to conscious businesses. High level of trust. But with that goes accountability as well. Love and care. transparency, etc. Think about this way of thinking, right? I mean, this can be within a company. You've got people who are making $20 million and flying in corporate jets, and their feet never touch the ground. And then you have people in the same company who are struggling to feed their family. Or you can think about it within a country. You've got the haves and have-nots, the 99% and the 1% or whatever. Or you can think of it at a species level or a planetary level. Right? This idea of the fortunate few and the miserable many. Most of us in this room are quite lucky, really. We've kind of won the lottery in terms of what circumstances we have been able to have. But the fact is that there are billions of people out there desperately bailing out for survival. The fact is, however, that we are not separate from them. Right? That we are all in the same boat. We're all connected. Our fates are intertwined. In the US, people take a lot of pride in saying our water is better and our air quality is better than ever. We have solved the environmental problem. I said, no, you just outsourced it. What used to be produced here is now being produced in China and other places. And then you read that there are cities in China where the air is so bad that kids have to put on a gas mask to go to school. It's true. There are cities where the river is so bad, rivers are so polluted that the water cannot be used even for industrial applications.
Here in Delhi.
Even here, I'm sure. Forget about agriculture, forget about drinking. And people say, oh my God, I don't want that to be the consequence of my consumption. And then you start to see now these clouds showing up above California, toxic clouds. I say, where did that come from? You look at it, it's made in China. We didn't order that. Maybe it is one system. Maybe it is all connected, right? So we're starting to feel it at an emotional level. We're now starting to experience it at a tangible level as well. And therefore, we're starting to act in different ways. So to conclude, humanity is one spirit. We are all connected. We're all interdependent. Our fates are intertwined. Our natural resources, we know, are finite. We've always known this, but now it's coming home to us. I do some work for POSCO in Korea, the steel company. At the entrance in Pohang, at the steel plant, it says resources are limited, creativity is unlimited. So our resources are limited, but our inner resources are unlimited. This is the one unlimited resource on this planet, is human creativity. My friend Devashish Chatterjee, who's the director of IIM Kozhikode now, at one of our conferences, he used this phrase which I really love. He said, human beings are not a resource, even though we talk about human resources. A resource is like a lump of coal. I use it, what happens? It's gone, it's no more, right? He said, human beings are like a source. A source is like the sun. It continuously generates light and energy and warmth, and creativity and inspiration and passion and love. Human beings are capable of operating as a source. Human beings are capable of being the most powerful form of renewable energy we've ever had on this planet in the right setting. We need to create the conditions in which that can happen. And therefore, we have a tremendous opportunity. Those of us who are alive today, I truly believe this, have the opportunity to lead the most meaningful lives human beings have ever led on this planet. Now that's saying a lot, but the fact is that there are now 7 billion of us, more than ever before. There will be 9 billion at some point. Our challenges are great. We are facing the brink of disaster on food and on oil and on energy and on water and on housing and on global warming and all kinds of things. But so is our consciousness of those challenges. We know that we face those challenges, and so is our ability to do something about it. You know, I go to some of these conferences around the world where young people are presenting these ideas for solving these problems. All of the solutions, it seems to me, are already out there, or they're almost out there. They're within our grasp. People have extraordinary ideas in terms of what to do with energy, what to do with food, what to do with housing, what to do with water. Okay? All we have to do is really unleash natural human capacity of ingenuity and creativity on those. But we need, for that to happen, we need to create the conditions in which human beings are able to flourish, when they can act as a source. And we believe that for the world of business, The way we do that is by creating these conscious organizations that are built on love and care, that have tremendous amounts of empowerment of people, that free people to do what they're capable of doing. And when we do that, all of these challenges really become extraordinary opportunities for value creation for all stakeholders for the foreseeable future. Okay, thank you very much. This is the new book that is being released actually on the 15th of this month. And these are a bunch of other books that I do recommend. And this is our website, so go there for a lot more information on this stuff. So thank you again. I'm sorry I've gone a little bit over, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Thank you.
You spoke about conscious capitalism, and then what I felt, and for most of the businesses, the gradual shift is from conscious capitalism to crony capitalism.
The shift is?
From conscious capitalism, if a business starts with conscious capitalism, let's say, and it grows to a big business, then eventually crony capitalism comes into picture.
It can,
yeah,
doesn't have to.
For
yeah.
let's say 70% of the businesses, if not for all. We talk about this Radia controversy where even the name of Tata's was dragged. So your take on lobbying, for that matter, is a question of morality or a question of legality? Because they're different in US and different in India.
Yeah. No, I think crony capitalism is a cancer that is a problem almost everywhere. And it is something that we really have to fight. If you look at all of the negativity and cynicism about capitalism, a lot of it comes from anger at crony capitalism. It's not, most people are in favor of free markets and free people. Right? Very few people would argue against that. But what people find unfair and unjust is when some companies are able to use the system to their advantage and get laws passed or get favorable treatment. So that is the biggest challenge that we have to overcome. And I think the way to overcome that, to me, is through principled action, where companies, not only individually, but I think the power comes from collective action. So I'm waiting to see a movement where companies sign on to a pledge that says we will neither give nor take, bribes, etc., in order to get things done. And when somebody demands it, we will publicize that name, right, and put that on the public record. And if there is solidarity in that, and we're starting to see a little bit of this happen in the US. In the US, it's a little bit different. Here we have sort of the petty corruption and the bribing that needs to be, it's part of the system for people to get basic things done. In the US, it's much more systematized. In other words, the system itself has been hijacked by special interests. And you have all these lobbyists who used to be Congress people who come out and start lobbying firms in Washington, D.C., and then they get laws passed that are favorable to their company, and then those companies in turn give money to the Congress people to get re-elected. That is a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. Right? There's no simple or easy answer to that. So what we're saying is that conscious capitalism cannot exist in a vacuum in a society which is unconscious or where the political system is. So in fact, the next book that I'm working on with John, but also Ed Freeman, who's the father of stakeholder theory and a philosopher, he's a moral philosopher and an ethicist. Our book is called Towards a More Conscious Society, because ultimately it really requires reform of the public sector, the government sector. It also requires the education system to change, not only at this level, the master's level, but really going down to at the primary level, where we need to start integrating these values and these ways of thinking into people at a very, very young age, so that they start to think about everything in those terms. So it's an enormous challenge, obviously, but it is necessary and it is certainly worthwhile attempting. And we do think it's possible to make a positive impact over time in our lifetimes. But collective action, I think, is very, very important there.
One last question.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, authenticity of purpose comes mainly through action. And for a new organization, an over-promotion of purpose also dilutes the purpose. So for a new organization, what's the best route?
In my experience, most new organizations are the product of some kind of a passion or a dream of the founder or founders. Right? And so that really has to be something that is authentically felt and believed in. And then as they start to assemble their team and they start to bring in other leaders, and also as they start to assemble their supplier base and others, they need to make sure that everybody resonates with that sense of purpose, with that particular purpose, right? And if they do that, then over time that will become part of the DNA of that organization, and that will, not that it is fixed or frozen forever, it will then naturally, organically evolve into something richer and broader over time, but it stays true to that original core. But I think the word you used is the right one. It has to be authentic. There are sometimes I've seen situations where a company is struggling and they hire an ad agency, and an ad agency comes up with a great idea for a purpose-driven business, or a higher purpose that you can then adopt. And in some cases, it can work. I know there's a dog food company called Pedigree, where they work with Child Day, and they came up with this idea of this is the dog-loving company. So instead of being in the business of putting wet stuff into cans and selling it for you to feed your dog, they said, no, we're a company that embodies everything about loving dogs. Anybody who works here has to love dogs, and you bring your dogs to the office, and every business card, on the back of it, you have a picture of your dog. Right? And when you meet somebody as a supplier or buyer, you talk about your dogs, right? And everything they do, they have dog shelters, they have dog adoption things now, and they've got not just dog food, but they're selling other things for dog welfare. They were able to take that thing that came from the outside, but actually connect it deeply with ultimately why some of these people were in that business, and it worked. But for the most part, it is not something that can be grafted in from the outside. Some organizations lose touch with it. It was there in the beginning, but they, over time, as the professional management comes in, or as they become larger, as they become publicly traded, they lose sight of that. And for those, it really means going back to the roots, going back to the beginning. What is it that we're really all about, right? And a third category of organizations that I've seen were ones that really started opportunistically just as money-making enterprises because they saw some opportunities out there. But as they reach midlife, just like as we humans reach midlife, we start to talk about meaning and purpose. They say, is this all there is? I find that some of those companies that are 25, 30, 40 years old, and the founders are now starting to think about their legacy and their impact. I'm working with a couple of those kinds of companies where they say, what is it ultimately that this company is going to be known for? So how can we create some kind of an identity there? So it's a complex issue, but it is a necessary, important one, because having that is truly where it all starts for a business.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all very much, and I wish you the very best in this program and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra Singh Sisodia, for a thoughtful session on value. It has been very inspirational, and we take this input lesson to the industry, and we ought to work with. And now I request Anil sir to honor our guest with a token of gratitude.